as an athlete, as a parent, to stay involved. Tell you want to have that work for you.
I got it on mute.
With you. Somebody's speaking into the mic. Make sure you're muted. I can't tell who that is. But what I would say to you is this. The recruiting went right down to, for us, when I met Derek, fortunately for my son in Montgomery College, they made to the Junior College World Series. You had AD that was on staff. He was talking to coaches, promoting his kids, which led to a full scholarship opportunity. For what I wanted to do, honestly, is instead of me sharing the video, what we want to talk about is the recruiting environment, and what the recruiting environment, I may bring it up later, but COVID has created a very different recruiting environment for all of our athletes. And you have to understand, you know, a couple of things coming into play. Recruiting is being done a lot more on video, a lot of live streaming, a lot of opportunities for live streaming. And if you listen to some of the things, and I'll share the post on our RBI site, just look at the YouTube clip later. It talks about what coaches are looking for and what coaches are trying to define. And coaches can't see refined things in interpersonal relations. Saying all that, Derek, I hope you're ready to come forward and really give an overview. And if your compliance director is there, you can bring her up. But Washington, D.C.'s own and Coppin State University's own athletic director. And what's interesting for this call, before I say the last thing about Derek, is Coppin is a school that really has focused on what I call a not so revenue generating sports. And they focused a lot on baseball and softball. That's why I wanted him on this call. He knows the value of those programs and everywhere he's been. Have a football program, so these are standalone programs at his university. And saying that, Derek, are you ready to go?
Ready to go, Harry. Thank you. Thank you so much. Happy New Year, everybody. It is my pleasure to spend a little time with you this morning to kind of talk about the recruiting process, and hopefully we can answer questions. As I heard Harry state, with the climate that we're in with COVID, things have changed, and the whole recruiting, the entire recruiting process is going to be totally different than ever before. Certainly, we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation, and as we continue, we just have to do what we can to, as in your case, as students, as parents, as guardians, do the best that you can to be creative and still search for opportunities for your children. So the majority of this conversation that we're going to have, when we get into the specifics of compliance, I'm going to turn it over to Vera Carrington, who is Assistant Athletic Director for Compliance here at Coppin State University. I'm sure you can imagine compliance is a tough job. I did it early in my career, but I don't act like I know all the rules now. I rely heavily on staff to navigate the compliance roles. But overall, I just want to again talk to you about coaches are looking. Coaches still have to recruit, whether depending on how long this dead period lasts. Coaches have to recruit. So I heard Harry say how you have to be creative and do your own videos and things of that nature, because all of my coaches are recruiting. And we can't use, as an athletic department, we cannot use COVID as an excuse for anything, whether it's academic achievement, whether it's athletic achievement for our teams. We still have to make sure that we recruit quality student athletes and that our current student athletes are doing what they're supposed to be doing and not use COVID as an excuse. That's the one thing we constantly have been saying since March. COVID cannot be an excuse. And as we progress and talk about recruiting, I believe most institutions will take the same approach, is that they still have to keep the ball rolling, still have to identify quality student athletes, and everyone wants to try to win. Everybody wants to maintain strong graduation rates, maintain strong retention. So therefore, we have to recruit quality student athletes. I would encourage strongly that if you know your children that are in high school, again, that no excuse approach. Everybody's learning virtual now. Virtual learning is the majority of the schools at this point in time. And somehow, some way, grades can't falter just because it's virtual. You gotta stay on your children. I have 19-year-olds who is in his second year in college, and I have a 10th grader who is doing the same thing that you guys are doing. He probably he's going through the early stages of the recruiting process. And all I'm telling him now is keep your grades right and don't let COVID be an excuse for a scenario that, oh, you didn't do well because I was in virtual. No excuses. Absolutely no excuses. I'm going to introduce Vera Carrington. I know she's on. Okay, I see Vera. Vera has been with us officially for a little bit over a year. Unofficially, longer than that. She came to us. I'm gonna tell you a little side note. People always want to know how to get into the business of athletics. This is what Vera did. She volunteered for us while she was a full-time teacher in the high school environment. She would come over here after school and volunteer and just learn compliance. And one thing led to another. I had individuals leave for other opportunities. And here she was, seasoned at the point that I felt confident in her competencies as it relates to compliance, hard worker, great relationships with our student athletes, understood compliance, understood academic advising, and we brought her on board full time, and she has been a true treasure for us and has really advanced our compliance operations, and I am very pleased to have her on board. Vera, what I want you to do is just let's just give an overview of where we stand with COVID and how the recruiting processes in COVID take place. And then we'll probably just open up for questions. Harry, is that the appropriate approach you want us to?
Yes, and I want to say that we have two recruiting coordinators that do this for a business owner, but I also want our parents to understand that they are doing this from a Division I aspect, and the rules are different for each division, whether it's Division I, Division II, Division III, or NAIA. So what she will be giving you is strictly from the Division I aspect. Many of you want to be Division I athletes. There has been a dead period on that. Without any more further ado, Ms. Johnson, are you ready?
Hello. So from our standpoint with COVID in Division I, as it pertains to being eligible, number one, for Division I athletics. So instead of taking your 4 years of courses that they usually look at for eligibility purposes, now it's just your first 6 semesters of school. So that's your freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And that's where they're getting your core courses from. And you still are required to have the 2.3. No SAT is required this year. Again, just like last year. As you stated, we are in a dead period where no official or unofficial visits can happen to any campuses. So for our coaches, live streaming, any tournaments that are happening, any videos that you have of any game film or highlight reel or anything like that, posting your things on social media. That's the best way right now our coaches are getting access to any recruits.
Okay, so as you heard, one of the things that we need to focus on is outreach. And I want everybody to understand that softball and baseball are catching up with other sports. And for example, in football, recruiting is done a lot on video. Now you're going to have to be video heavy. And so when you talk about video, it's the kind of quality video that you want. You want to show your fundamentals. You want to show your skills. You want to be in a program like our program where now we're even going to have measurement because we're using the Blast app to show your true performance on your swings and your different things so they can evaluate you. I guess a couple of other things. Derek, do you want to add some other things from your point of view as AD?
I do. I do. From just to kind of add a little bit to what you said from the video standpoint, I think it's important that you understand coaches are looking for fundamentally strong athletes. So your video has to display your ability to be a fundamentally strong performer. So the videos that you create, as it relates to softball or if it were baseball, really give the proper angles, let them see back speed, let them see everything that a coach from a coach's eye, and Harry will direct you that way, but you have to be sure that you're sending quality videos to institutions, because just like anything else that's received, whether it's on paper, video, if it looks trash, it's going to be perceived as trash. So be sure that you take the time to present quality, a quality video to whoever you choose to send. And also anything that you write, take the time and make sure that a letter that you're sending to the coach, certainly no typos, the grammatical errors, the grammatics have to be appropriate. But take this serious. This is how you're presenting yourself. And just, you know, the old saying, first impressions are lasting impressions, and that would apply to this. So you want to be sure that it's quality, it's showing your fundamentals, it's showing whatever assets you have, whether it's speed, whether it's strength, from an agility perspective, whatever allows you to stand out above someone else. Show your highlights, show your strong points, sell yourself. And I think that just has to be stated because it's so important, because they're getting so much from all over. Everyone wants to send to our coaches, and it's amazing the number of videos and things that they're receiving, and they do look at them. Trust me, they view them, and they're viewing them from a technical eye. So you want to be sure that you present it and you create it with the assistance of a technical eye. So it's two parts to this. You got to sell yourself athletically, and then based on what Ms. Carrington just shared, you have to be able to sell yourself academically, because all things being equal, if a coach has two videos and one person is here, the other person is here, and the difference in academics might direct a coach in a certain way. So be prepared to create what I call a diverse portfolio. Talk about certainly your athletic accomplishments, your academic accomplishments, but there's a significant third piece of the pie that we have to address as well. And that's whatever intangibles you bring to the table, whatever intangibles that can demonstrate leadership, being involved in your team, of course, team captain, put that down. Or if you're in any club, and if you're in any clubs and organizations that require leadership, include that. Whatever you're doing in the community, sell yourself as a broad-based person, sell yourself with a diverse portfolio. It always helps. Okay.
Derek, can I plug something to that?
Go ahead.
Yeah. This is
Sure.
Tonja.
Sure, Tonja. Who you are, Tonja, because it's important that you do that and let them know your background. I'll say this, since Tanya's going to add this. Tonja also had the pleasure of being around Derek at Bowie, and these paths cross. She's been a coach at every level. So Tonja, please go ahead and add something to that.
Well,
Coach.
one of the things that I think people are remiss. We have a lot of dad coaches in this travel ball world, and I get a lot of videos from players whose dad is doing the skills video, and because it's dad, the body language is horrible. And and I call him on, and I say, what's up with your demeanor on this video? Well, it was my dad, and he was well, guess what? As a coach, I don't want to deal with that for 4 years. If this is what you're showing me, trying to sell yourself, I don't want to have to deal with that for 4 years. So body language is one of the huge things that I preach to the kids that I work with when they do a skills video. Even if you are body language and looking like your dog tired during the video, if you have to do the video in segments so that you don't look winded, then do the video in segments. You don't have to do it all in one day. Put on the same uniform and go out there, put your hair the same way and go out there the next day and finish the other half of the video. But bad body language, just looking winded, it's one of the easiest ways for me as a coach to be turned off. And I don't have to go back and look at a second video. With our guys, they get unlimited videos. But if I don't like the first one, I don't have to go back. When you put another one out there a week later, I'm not required to go back and look at it.
Thank you, Coach. Derek, if you could, I want you to talk a couple of things. I want you to talk about being a MEAC school, a historically Black college, and competing at the Division I level with your two programs. A lot of people pass by the opportunities at these HBCUs and especially don't understand that they're just under 300 D1 programs in baseball and softball. And so competitively, you get to play against all those other universities and have opportunities to go in. So could you talk about that? And then the next question, you can also fold in your experiences at D1, D2, and your JUCO experiences, because you've had to do both. All three, I mean.
Sure, I can do that. With regard to MEAC, SWAC, SIAC, CIAA, and of course, I did try to mention Division I and Division II HBCUs. I love to get into this conversation because you have stereotypes that you know the predominantly white conferences are here and the HBCUs are there. And I want to really dispel that to let you know that from a MEAC perspective, we run first-class programs. We have first-class resources for our athletes, and we compete against everyone. When I say that, of course, we have our MEAC schedule, but we compete against all of the other conferences that are out there, depending on where the geography is located. So a student athlete will get a wonderful experience by attending an HBCU. You will get the experience of competing against quality teams within your conference, but certainly, as with any conference play, part of conference play is, yes, that's the challenge. You shoot for championships, but you have the opportunity to play non-conference, a non-conference schedule. And that allows you to compete against anyone and everyone. So we fear no one. Our baseball program has risen to a level over the last 4 or 5 years that we feel confident of playing against anyone. And our softball program is right behind that. And I'm not just speaking for us. As a conference, we have done well. When we get into non-conference, we have documented victories over some surprisingly what you would think are unbelievably powerhouse programs. We've defeated them in non-conference play, and that's documented in the MEAC as well as in the other conferences. So I just want you to know that the experience that you get in the HBCU is value. It has tremendous value. And that's the word that I like to use because it's the word that's appropriate. The value that you get from an HBCU, so many intangibles goes a long way, but you still are able to compete on a non-conference schedule. And of course, as everyone's goal is to win their conference championship, and then advance to the NCAA playoffs and such. So, and of course, at that time, if you advance, you're playing against everyone. To talk about Harry's second request, and I've been fortunate, and it's unique that I can say I've been an athletic director at Division I, Division II, the junior college level, and even, I don't know if Harry knows this, high school. So I've done all levels, and I want to say that while each level is different, there are so many similarities in Division I and Division II, because the bottom line is you want to compete, and you want to compete, advance from high school and compete. You have Division I programs, they have a wide range that you know, some are here, then you have your mid-majors, and Division II is the same way. You have some Division IIs that could really compete consistently with Division I. Certain conferences are just like that, and they can compete. And then you have other conferences that it might be a little bit of a step down, but it's all quality competition, and they're all quality institutions. And at the end of the day, whether it's D1, D2, NAIA, junior college, that you can advance to a four-year institution, at the end of the day, it's about getting your education. I use this all the time because this was told to me by Morgan Wooten, my high school basketball coach. Don't let basketball use you, you use basketball. And the same thing, you just fill in the blank for whatever sport. Don't let softball use you, you use softball. Same for baseball. Whatever the sport is applicable. So I share that with you to say, everyone's not a D1, everyone's not a D2, but the opportunity to advance your career, to continue playing, to build your network, to create more friends, more relationships, which translates into more job opportunities. You'd be amazed that wherever you are, D1, 2, 3, your teammates, you meet their parents are working in this industry and that industry. People are looking to hire athletes. Athletes know how to win. Athletes know how to overcome adversity. All these things that you've been hearing, they're factual, that people look to hire athletes. So part of your college experience is developing a network with your teammates, with their friends, with their families, with their relationships. So D1, 2, 3, NAIA, JUCO, if you advance beyond high school, if you're able to play, it can and will open doors for you. And that's really what this is all about. So Harry, I'm glad you asked me to talk about that because it's very important. Again, everyone's not a D1 athlete. D2 has a great logo, a great tagline that the NCAA created years ago, but it's, I chose Division II. And some people really believe in that. They choose D2 because that is more of where they want to compete in the college level is D2. While it is taken seriously, I believe that D2 athletes, this is a blanket statement, really try to become well-rounded individuals because they realize that D2 is probably not going to launch them into a professional career, but it gives them a solid foundation of a wonderful college athletic experience, as well as the opportunity to compete. And like I said, make friends, build your network base, and move on with your life. So whatever is the right opportunities for you You take them and you take advantage of them and make them work the best as you can for yourself.
Thanks, Derek. And I'm going to say this. I'm going to ask Ms. Johnson to kind of just over briefly the requirements for Division I athletes so people can understand what it takes to be a D1. Of course, the glaring requirements or differences are scholarship dollars. And you got to understand that even at D1, there are some, like in the Ivies, that scholarships are based on academics, not on the athletics. And so you need to look at all of those different things on your checkoff list. And I hope you heard what Derek says. Use this athletic ability you have to open doors, because he can tell you, and our coach coordinators, who we're going to hear from in a little bit, can tell you that you get in what I consider the short pile, when you're on a coach's list to get into the schools you want to get. And that's not because you're not academically qualified. It's because you're bringing some intangible other skills that make you something that you're a commodity to get in those schools. Ms. Johnson, could you kind of highlight some of the D1 requirements? Again, we have Derek Carter and Miss Vera Carrington Johnson from Coppin State University on. We will also make a video of this and make it on YouTube available so you can go back and listen to this information. Go ahead.
So for Division I qualifications, and all of this information you can find on ncaa.org on their website. You can find all the requirements for Division I and Division II. The requirements for Division I are a core course GPA of 2.3, and that's in 16 core course units. Your core course progression starts, like I said, freshman year, and because of COVID, they're doing freshman, sophomore, and junior year. The other thing is you have to be certified as an amateur. Once you register yourself on the NCAA portal in the eligibility center, you're going to be required to do certain tasks. Upload your current official high school transcript. Now they're giving leeway with that also, to where if you don't have official documents because of COVID, you don't have access to your high school, or maybe your high school counselors aren't going into the building, that you can upload unofficial documents as well, whether it's your report card or if you had an unofficial transcript before. So you have to upload your transcripts. You have to request amateurism. That means that you haven't been paid for your sport. And amateurism is specific to each sport. So you can be an amateur in one sport and be a professional in another sport. It's specific to your sport. The courses that are required are 3 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science, with an additional core course in a science class. And then you have other certified courses. These courses are on your school's website, where when we look them up, your counselors have already uploaded the courses that your high school have, and that those courses have been certified by the NCAA as core courses that we can take, and it will go to your 2.3 GPA to get you there. That would include things like Spanish, economics. You need to have 2 social sciences as well. I'm sorry, I forgot those. So those things make up your core course GPA.
Thank you. Also, I want to stress to you all as parents, your academic advisor in high school, and especially during COVID, it's going to be important that you understand how to connect with them, but you also understand that every academic advisor is not as versed on student athletics requirements as they should be. And I'm not saying that as a punch at people, but you have some that don't understand how to track the student athletes requirements that are in your NCAA portals. When you go to that NCAA site, you know that, and you discuss that with your guidance counselor. And also the information that she shared with you is going to be different for D2 and D3. But you also, and there's also a portal for NAIA, other college conference. And in some cases, Ms. Johnson, can you speak to waivers? Are there waivers that are granted for the fee for NCAA and other things that you're aware of that can be applied to students when they do that. It's a nice fee. Don't let that get in your way, but I just want to put that on the record if she's aware of any of those things.
So the waivers are through your school's counselor. If you put in, once you register in the portal, it'll say, are you eligible for a fee waiver? If you click that, they're going to wait for documentation from your school counselor. Usually if you qualify for a fee waiver for your SAT, then you qualify for a fee waiver for your NCAA registration.
Thank you. Also, we had a question about D2, and I don't know if you know it all, but what can you go in a little bit in the basic differences, maybe Director
Sure.
D2 as well, and what would be with that?
Yes, so the requirements, I'm looking at the form now on NCAA portal. The requirements for Division II is a 2.2 GPA instead of the 2.3 GPA. And then your 16 core courses are different from Division I to Division II. Their makeup is different than what is required for Division I. If it's 3 sciences required for Division I, it may be 2 required for Division II. But the main difference is the 2.2 GPA.
Thank you. And that's also across the board. AIA, you have to look at the requirements because it's geared out a little different. We do it on per credit hours, and you have to track them once you get to the college level to keep your eligibility. You are Mr. Carter can talk about eligibility requirements that students must maintain while they're at the Division I level and what you have to do. Of course, first we start having to be a full-time student. So could you go into that, please?
So for our freshmen, of course, yes, you have to be a full-time student, and that is a minimum of 12 credits unless you're in your senior year and you don't have 12 credits to finish your degree. So for freshmen, they have to maintain, and this is, I mean, it may sound like a small number, but believe me, you know, we have some athletes that don't meet this minimum requirement. So for freshmen and sophomores, a 1.8 GPA. And you have to pass for the whole year, for the whole academic year. And that academic year includes fall, winter, spring, and summer. You have to pass 24 credits for freshmen, okay? You have to pass a minimum of 6 credits per semester in order to be eligible for your next academic year. After your freshman year, you're only required to pass 18 credits for the academic year. But again, you still have to pass a minimum of 6 credits per semester to be eligible with the minimum GPA. And it moves in your junior year, so 1.9, and your senior year, so 2.0.
And I'm going to say this, and I guess Derek can speak to it as a coach. You know, you will find as an athletic director that in softball and baseball, the team GPAs are generally in the higher realms in the academic environment because they focus a lot on it. So giving you is the bare minimums. And I would say to you, if you go for the bare minimums, you're going to limit yourself to opportunities in different schools and opportunities that you want. So if we ask on our travel teams that you try to maintain a 3.5. That's the same thing I ask as a coach at Washington Adventist because it's very important. And one of the things I always said to my student athlete kids is that the one thing you control is you can be an academic All-American, you know, and it has nothing to do with your performance on the field. And that's going to show highly in recruiting. Derek, you want to speak to that?
I do. I can't emphasize enough of setting a high bar. Sometimes you get caught up in some of the NCAA numbers, and these are the minimums, and we shouldn't even be operating like that. So set your bar, set your goals high. Don't even think about 2.2 for Division II, 2.3. I mean, everybody on this call and your goal should be 4.0 in everything that you do. Just like when you play a game, your goal is to win every game. That's the analogy that I use. You want to win every game on and off the field. So I don't even like stating we have to explain what the guidelines are. I get that, but I don't even like getting into the 2-point anything, because everything should start at least with a 3. If you're not going to have a 4, you should be starting with a 3, because that's got to be the goals that you set for yourselves, and that the expectation is to maintain the high standards. So Vera, I also want you to, I don't think you covered, just so they can understand the concept of satisfactory progress towards a degree. So I'm gonna ask you to cover that. I was reminded, it's a young man on this call who was a good friend of mine, and one of the young men who I've had the opportunity to work with before, Corey Irby, but he just sent me a text, and it's important. I want to give him credit for reminding me of this, but he wanted me to speak on just behavior and how you conduct yourselves. And sometimes this I forget to talk about it because it seems obvious to me, but then I would be remiss if I don't take the opportunity. You don't want anything, you don't want blemishes, you don't want black eyes on your resume, if you will, any type of situations that you got in trouble in high school, certainly no legal issues, but you want to keep your slate clean, because that's another thing that when we're getting transcripts from high schools and you know, there's certain notes in there that this young lady, this young man was a problem or whatever. We don't want that type of environment, that type of person to bring that baggage to us. So make sure that your behavior is first class, just like everything else that I've mentioned about you. I want to see everything being first class as you advance to your college choices. Okay, but Vera, if you could just kind of briefly go over satisfactory progress so they can understand once they enroll what the expectations are.
Also, before she does that, I think Mr. Graves, our recruiting coordinator, did you have something you wanted to add to that so she can answer it all in one?
Yeah, I think I would like to basically let Mr. Carr respond to what I'm about to say. I think what's very important in the recruiting process at the embassy stage is social media, okay? And, you know, when I'm working with kids as it relates to recruiting, the first thing I say is, hey, that coach is going to look at the coach, the AD, is that social media. So if you're out there, and you don't necessarily have to be doing things wrong, you could be around somebody in the background that's doing something they shouldn't be, and that the perception is that's the life that you live in. So my comment, the question more so is, if Mr. Carter can relate back to say, hey, how important it is to have clean social media as you go through this process.
Derek, your mic went off. Cut your mic back on.
I'm sorry, Mr. Graves. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay. I cannot stress enough the importance of, I mean, everybody's on social media and nothing is wrong with being on social media, but you have to be smart with your social media, because as much as it can bring you goodness, it can bring you down in the same manner. So, and the thing about it, if you post it, it's there. It's there. Somebody can, before you can delete it, somebody can snapshot and it's there. So I cannot stress enough that your decisions, your judgment, and everything that you do can come and backfire. We have an example in Washington, D.C. right now with the quarterback of the football, the former quarterback of the football team. Anytime you see a situation like that, I always try to use it as a learning experience for younger people. And you can see how judgment, poor decisions can ruin things for you. So again, Mr. Graves, thank you for bringing that up. And just don't let social media be your downfall. That's all I can say, because it can be a good thing and you can use it properly and you can sell yourself on social media. And coaches, because coaches are going to look. They're going to look at your Instagram and whatever else. I'm a little bit out of touch. Ms. Carrington will be the one that will really tie this social media conversation home. I'm gonna turn it over to her Ms. Carrington, if you want to add to social media, and then again, if you could just transition a little bit into satisfactory progress.
So also social media can get you deemed ineligible as well, depending on what kind of conduct you are displaying on social media. In our NCAA handbook, there is a section on social media and things that are permissible and impermissible and things like that. So you just want to be very intentional on what you put out on social media and make sure that it's showing you in the best light possible. As far as, and the other thing about grades, so as you all were talking, I pulled up our team GPAs for softball and baseball. And out of those 46 athletes, 39 of them have over a 3.0. 7 of them have a 4.0 GPA. So our softball, our athletic department as a whole has been really making a great, making great progress with team GPAs and making sure that academics is a top priority. So as far as satisfactory progress for our university, you must maintain a 2.0 GPA each semester, or you can be put on probation or be suspended. This also affects your financial aid. If you're not making satisfactory academic progress, your financial aid can be withheld and it has to be reinstated once you have met with your advisor and come up with some kind of academic success plan. So yes, the NCAA says your minimum GPA is a 1.8, but your institution has their own set of rules, and those override and supersede the NCAA's rules and requirements. And that's for admissions also. So if your admissions office says that you must have an overall cumulative GPA of a 3.0 or 2.5 or whatever, and you've been speaking to a coach and you let them know that you have this 2.3. Well, if you can't get into the university, then you can't play on their team. So yes, those minimum GPAs are, what the NCAA sets as their bar, but you should be setting your sights even higher. The other thing is progress toward degree. So when I talked about those credit hours for freshmen and sophomores, juniors, you need to be making progress towards your degree. So that GPA is not just in a bunch of recreation classes, unless your major is recreation or physical education. It's not in bogus classes. The classes that you take every semester are going toward your degree. So your GPA for the NCAA that we have to put into a portal is only in those courses that go toward your GPA. So you must take courses that go toward your degree. And then we do a 20, 40, 60, and 80% of that degree. And that's how we come up with the minimum requirements for each semester, for each academic year.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to wrap? What I wanted to do, and I don't know if you will be able to stay on, both of you, and I appreciate your time this morning. I went real far with you guys because it's very rare that you can have the opportunity for your parents and student athletes to have this kind of insight from the level that they're trying to get to. And I say this to everybody here is that Coppin is making some leaps and bounds, and it's a school you need to consider. And one of the questions that they talked about in closing is, what are some of the websites you should be following other than the NCAA website? So the NCAA has a website as well as the NAIA. And also there are different requirements for junior college, and what maybe because Mr. Carter has been all those places, he can tell you how that kind of works. And also I think that one of the things we need to talk about too is the competition level that these young athletes are facing because of COVID, where they're now facing JUCOs that are backed up in the system. And what I mean by that is that these junior college players are having to compete for spots now with people who have a year left because their year was re-granted from last year. Can you talk about how COVID won and what that meant? Derek?
Sure, as you stated, and I guess everyone knows that last spring, NCAA canceled all spring activities. So your softball, baseball, all your spring sports were given another year. Now, clearly that was the right decision. But for a lot of institutions, it became a little problematic in that schools had already signed incoming freshmen to come in for the fall of 20. And now you had returnees who you did not expect to be returnees. Now, granted, it was up to the institution. This wasn't a mandate, but you had the ability to bring people back for an additional year. So it did create a kind of a backlog, and Ms. Carrington can talk about it as well. But part of it's just where we are. Like, for example, football and basketball now that competed in the fall, and if they continue to compete in the winter, they're going to get another year next year because of COVID. So colleges are getting an extra year, but your high school athletes are still graduating and getting pushed into the system, and it's developing into a backlog of almost too much talent. So it's up to the institutions to decide, if we have a young man or woman who has graduated, and if it's the right thing for the program and for them, we would tell them to move on. And if someone that we want to return, it's really a case-by-case scenario that we'll have to evaluate. But it's a little bit unfortunate, but it's the right decision, because COVID, you want people to have their years back and not be punished because of the devastations of the pandemic.
That bottleneck is going to be in place for at least 2 or 3 years.
It is. It is, Tonja.
That bottleneck is going to continue for 2 or 3 recruiting cycles at least.
Yeah.
And what I will also say is, and this is where Derek was very helpful to me with my son's decision when it came to junior colleges, you have to learn to look at these websites of schools you're interested in and look at the type of athletes they're recruiting. Campbell ended up being a good fit for my son because I think somewhere between 30 and 40% of their student athletes were junior college players. And also I want for baseball guys on this call, it's different for baseball than it is for softball, because what happens for junior college guys, a lot of you guys are worried about early signings and all this stuff. And I tell you not to worry about that, because really what happens in junior college is, if you look at certain universities that are say at the Division I and trying to compete, they want to fill gaps from the baseball draft. And what that means is in June, you have the draft, you have guys who are eligible as juniors. And so what they do is transfer that money over in baseball to those incoming JUCO players. And so when you're looking at money on the table, the number, and I'll let our recruiting coordinators tell you what those numbers are. The number of eligible scholarships at D1, D2, and D3 varies, and those monies are split up. And that's why academics is very important, because when you heard me say a full ride, that ride was encompassed from academic money as well as other programmatic money. Here in DC, we're very fortunate because we have what's called DC Tag, and you're eligible up to $10,000 from the state. Coaches look at that and say, well, you're getting money anyway, and that's a bonus in your recruiting piece. But you need to understand how to leverage these things for you to be a good student athlete and have an opportunity to go to college.
Yeah, so that year of additional year eligibility that was granted from the NCAA, it has, we see it this year in our programs where we had recruits coming in, incoming freshmen coming in, and we thought we were graduating seniors and they were done, but they were granted that extra year. And you have to make space not only in your roster, but in your budget for them. But if you do look at the school that you want to go to and say, oh, they were having 5 seniors that were leaving, but those 5 seniors are staying, and you choose to go the junior college route, please make sure that you are on an academic path that is going to keep you eligible for when you want to transfer to a Division I school. So let's just say you weren't deemed a qualifier, even though those standards are low. You know, we don't know what can happen. But let's just say you weren't deemed a qualifier and you go to a junior college. You must graduate from that junior college before you can be eligible to play at a Division I level. You must graduate. If you are deemed a non-qualifier, you must graduate from your junior college, okay? If you go to a 4-year college and then you go to a 2-year college and you want to go back to a 4-year college, you must graduate from the junior college in order to participate at your next 4-year college, okay? So yes, there are waivers available, but they are really, really hard to get approved. So just make sure when you are, if you're at a junior college where they say, okay, we're going to put you in these courses, make sure that you're taking English, make sure you're taking science, make sure you're taking math in that freshman year, so that when it's time for you to transfer, if you want to transfer after your freshman year, that you have those 6 requirements of English to come into a 4-year school and be eligible. You need 6 credits. If you stay a whole academic year at a junior college, you need 6 credits in English, you need 3 credits in science and 3 credits in math to be automatically eligible to move to the Division I level and be able to play immediately.
Also, I want to add to you folks, we're going to talk real briefly before I switch over, because I have them on, is in-state versus out-of-state and the advantages. Because in some situations, if you go to a junior college, for example, in the state of Maryland, there's a guaranteed admission to that other state school as long as you meet the requirements. And so that's a big thing. And plus, then the in-state dollars are how it's viewed. That's why you see in so many places, some schools have heavy in-state rosters when you look at their rosters, because those rosters are being filled by people and the cost of difference. Can you speak to that a little bit and what that means in the state of Maryland as a state institution for you guys?
The other thing is a lot of the junior colleges in our area, if you transfer into certain state schools, they give you a scholarship. I know here we give, I don't know if it's $1,000 or $2,000 scholarship for transfers that come from junior colleges in Maryland. So the difference in in-state and out-of-state tuition for us is about $6,000, $6,500 a year. And that costs, I mean, you may say, oh, it's only $6,000, but it adds up. It adds up, and it's easier to make that transition from that junior college in Maryland to another junior college, to a 4-year college in Maryland, because like I said, there are financial gains from that. And the courses probably are more likely to transfer over into another state college.
Thank you.
Harry, I just want to add from a athletic department budgetary standpoint, I think this is where you were going. Every athletic department, people run their departments differently, but it's about the bottom line dollar at the end of the day. And clearly, if you can recruit more in-state students, you're spending less dollars than you would on out-of-state students. So it's very attractive to institutions to find in-state students. Now, again, and Harry mentioned this, the great thing about being in DC is the DC tag can kind of give you a little leverage to some other institutions, but we monitor, and probably as we progress, we're going to have to do a better job of really honing in on in-state student athletes versus out-of-state because of the dollars. And, it's all about, we have to manage our budgets and look at where our enrollment is as an institution and the challenges that we have financially. We have to make decisions. And one of the ways that we can reduce our costs is to reduce the amount of money we're spending on out-of-state students. How do we do that? Clearly by in-state students. So that's it. Everybody has to be strategic in how they run their departments, and some institutions more than others, but you have to focus on in-state many times because of the the bottom line dollars of in-state versus out-of-state athletic aid.
And so I'm gonna end on that note and take to our recruiting coordinators. But what I'll say to you is you got to look at your states, because in your states are large. You know, if you're in Virginia, I mean, just look at how you can go to Southern Virginia or places way down that away from you that give you opportunities. And you also have to look at the difference between privates and publics. If you're in Maryland, that same thing exists for you. And even for me, you know, one of my daughter's biggest things was she didn't want to be close to home. She ended up 2 miles from home because that was the best financial package for a lot of different reasons. And so those different things. So when you're in state, look at your in-state opportunities and your dollars for your state you're in. If you're in DC, also understand that you're treated as an in-state student, because we're not a state. That is the only advantage we really have by not being a state. The tag money is applied to any state institution. So that saying all that, I'm going to bring on, I want you all to
Coach Thomas,
yeah.
I added a document in the chat, and hopefully you all can bring it up. It's the Eligibility Center brochure that has those requirements in it.
Thank you.
And I just want to add, I mean, I don't want to take it for granted that people understand private institutions, there is no in-state, out-of-state, okay? If they're private, their tuition is what it is. Generally high is what it is. But the difference, if we're talking in-state and out-of-state, is with state-funded institutions, okay?
Right. Thank you. So now I'm going to bring in a dear friend and someone who we do work with who is involved, and she's with National Recruiting Service, and that's Coach Braxton, who is coached at South Carolina State, Bowie State, and now hones these skills and does it at the grassroots level. She is also a 23U coach for the Bowie Blue Jays and does some other things. Tonja, can you just give us a brief overview of what your program offers and the opportunities that people can have? And then we'll have Van Graves, who I'll introduce next.
Sure.
Tonja,
Am I unmuted?
no, you're good.
Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Okay. So I'm a school teacher by day, and I tell people that when we work with our kids, we tell them, you know, when you read, make sure you pick out the who, the where, the why, the how. And so as I was kind of trying to think of how to present this, I said, well, just do what you tell your kids to do. Tell them who you are. Who we are is the National Scouting Report. We are the premier college recruiting organization in the country. We have been doing this and doing it, I think, very well for 41 years. What does NSR do? We take the mystery and the myth out of the recruiting process. We educate our scouts, and more importantly, we educate our families, we educate our athletes that have aspirations to play at the college level. Where do we do it? We do it anywhere that there are players, coaches, parents, administrators. I've done recruiting seminars in dugouts. I've done recruiting seminars in churches. I've done them in high schools. I've done them on buses. I do them at club practices. And the goal for us is to bridge the gap between the myths about recruiting and the facts about recruiting. My primary sports are softball, volleyball, and gymnastics. But as a recruiter, my job is not always to assess a basketball player's basketball talent. My job is to send that basketball player's video to one of our basketball scouts and let them evaluate and provide a true scouting report about their metrics. Obviously, there are different metrics for every sport, but where I come in, the recruiting process doesn't change. So that's kind of where my bread and butter is. We essentially take each individual family, assess the talent of the athlete, We give real feedback. Then we go through into the athletes' aspirations. What do their grades look like? What does their character look like? Which you guys have already touched on. You know, we in our interview process, we want to know, we want to know your overhand velocity, speed. We want to know your exit speed off the bat, but we also want to know what kind of a person are you? If we talk to your coaches, what would your coaches say about you? If we talk to your teammates, what would your teammates say about you? We do this because we're not an open enrollment organization. Everybody doesn't get in. We pride ourselves on, if the NSR tag is on a kid, that means a few things. That means that kid's got grades. That means that kid has got good character. And that means that kid can play. And as many as we accept, there are some that we turn away, because any of those three that you don't grade well on, it makes you less of a viable prospect. And you know, I've had recruiters send me players that were good players, but you didn't want to deal with them for 4 years. And you know, that's part of that whole character piece. So the interview piece for us becomes really important. Everybody doesn't get in. The second part of why we go through that process is because we need to know intent. Just because you're playing travel ball doesn't mean that your intent is to play in college. And if your intent is not to play in college, then there really is no point in us doing all of this and going through this entire process. And it truly is, and I tell people this is why the earlier you sign, the earlier you start this process, the better, because it is a process. If I sign you at 15, no, a college coach can't talk to you, but they can talk to me about you. And we sign players based on projectability. You're not going to be the same player when you're 17 that you were when you're 15. Not if you're training the right way. You're going to be bigger, you're going to be stronger, you're going to be faster. So we sign on a player's projectability. What else? I was listening to when you were running off the numbers. And so let me just throw some numbers out there to you. 297 Division I schools sponsor softball. 289 Division II schools sponsor softball. 240 Division III schools sponsor softball. And then 200 NAIA schools. So that's 1,026 places that you can go. And let me tell you something, and I tell people this all the time. They do not get caught up into D1-itis. There is good softball being played at every single one of those levels. But if you do the math, let's just say every one of those rosters carries 18 players, you're looking at about 18,000, roughly 18,500, something like that, players every year. But conversely, you've got 360,000 young ladies playing softball, either high school or travel, every year. So there's not room for everybody. 95% of the young ladies that play or athletes that play in high school are not going to play in college. So you have to ask yourself early, do I want to be part of the 95% or do I want to be part of the 4%? And how you make that determination is, I mean, it's a process. And the other thing that I have to dispel when I talk to families, you know, I always ask, you know, in the interview, what's your dream school? Well, my dream school is LSU. Okay. Well, you're 5'3" and 117 pounds. Chances are you're not going to play at LSU. Now, I don't kill the dream at the beginning, but once we start going through the process and they start to see what kind of feedback they're getting from what kinds of schools, the light kind of comes on that, okay, maybe my goals for LSU, they're a little lofty. So then we start to scale it down some. But that only works if you start the process early, because nobody wants to have LSU in their mind going into their senior year and they've not heard from any of the coaches at LSU. I also explained to them that if you were going to play at a university of anybody, you would know by the time you were a sophomore, because those kind of coaches would be approaching you. Those kind of coaches at those caliber of schools would be inviting you to their camps. Well, I went to the camp at the University of Georgia. Okay, did you go as a prospect or did you go as a camper? There's a difference. So, we spend a lot of money. Everybody knows travel ball is not cheap. Going to these camps is not cheap. But at some point, mom and dad, to send her to the University of Florida's camp when she's a junior doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because she's going as a camper. It's a moneymaker for them. So a huge part of what we do is really education. It's really walking families. And I have families that tell me all the time, we didn't know what we didn't know. Well, you're not supposed to know what you don't know, but you can have somebody who knows what they do know. And when your daughter is only a sophomore and the University of Maryland coach saw her at a developmental camp and saw that, hey, she's got some skills. No, they can't talk to you, but they can talk to me. So a huge part of it is education. A huge part of it is advocacy. My approach to the families that I deal with, I'm just very real with them. If your daughter is a great athlete, but she's flirting with a 2.5 and a 980 on her SAT, and she's only taken it one time, and she's a junior. And, I went through this with families with COVID, because, they kept changing the dates on the SAT and the ACT, and they kept canceling. Well, I had a family, I ended up sending them to New Jersey. Was it New Jersey? Yeah, Connecticut, to take the test. You can't just sit. You can't take it one time and just sit on it. Mr. Carter was saying, yes, COVID is a huge inconvenience for everybody, and it has been a huge inconvenience. It's made us change everything, but recruiting has not stopped. During this whole thing, recruiting has not stopped. We've been rolling. Yes, we do. We do it mostly by video. When he was talking about the video, let me just tell you something about the video. It's awesome that she hit 3 home runs in a weekend. And that's fine if you want to plug that at the end of her video. But I want to see her skills. I want to see if 20 ground balls are hit to her, can she pick up 18 of them clean, give me a good feed to second base or a good feed to first base. I want to see a shortstop throw from the hole. I want to see a shortstop throw on the run. I want to see front toss. I want to see what kind of contact she's making. Is she pulling everything? Is she driving the ball both ways on the field? Is she going gap to gap for a pitcher? You don't have to. She doesn't have to be throwing 60, but she does have to have a good one good east-west pitch and at least one good north-south pitch for me to even think about presenting her to a certain caliber of school. What he said about the caliber, the Division I, Division II, Division III, again, there's good softball being played. If you go up and play schools in that PSAC conference, they can beat a lot of Division I schools easily. So you just have to be, you have, knowledge is power. And when I ask questions to prospects, and I one of the questions I always ask, How far is too far from home? And the reason we ask that question is because with our process, once a month, we're putting you out there to every college coach in the country. Every college coach in the country is getting a hit from us. Hey, this is Harry Thomas, and he is a 2021 graduate that has this and that and this and that and the third, but they're getting that every single month. Yes, parents try to do it themselves. Travel coaches, bless your heart. High school coaches, bless your heart. They don't have the resources and they don't have the time. Recruiting takes time. It takes a lot of hours. We have a whole team that this is all we do. This is all we do all day long. We live in recruiting. You can, the craziest thing that I hear is when somebody says, well, we put a YouTube video. We did a skills video when we put it out on YouTube, or we did a skills video when we put it out on Captain U. Fabulous. We don't spend a whole lot of time on YouTube and Captain U unless we're desperate for players, unless somebody that we thought we were going to get, we didn't get. The other misnomer is that if I'm good enough, the coaches will find me. If I play on a good travel team, the coaches will find me. Well, newsflash, we don't go to tournaments to walk 10 fields on 3 complexes. We go to tournaments with a list of players that we already know, either because we've seen them, another coach has turned us on to them, or that kid has gotten an endorsement. We go to the tournaments to see them. If you happen to be playing in a game against them and you do something fantastic, you have you pitch a shutout, okay, then we take your information down. And I want to know who that kid is. But it just doesn't work the way a lot of people think it does. And everybody who's on this call probably knows at least one person that should have played at the college level that didn't. And a lot of times it's not because of ability. It's because lack of preparation. It really is a process. And if you wait until your junior year to start it, you're way behind the 8 ball. The other thing I tell all of the families that we work with, you recruit the player, you recruit the family. So mom and dad, when you're at these tournaments, whether you agree, disagree with the coach's decision to play baby girl or not to play baby girl, that's not the venue for you to be in the stands, berating the coach, because all you're doing is taking recruiting opportunities away from your own kid.
Coach
So
Braxton,
you're doing.
I think what I want to do on that is I want to transition and let Van say something so we can ask both of you questions and have the AD and his folks add anything that they hear from you.
Okay.
And I'm going to transition to Van because Van, I met him through travel ball with the New Jersey Intensity. He had a daughter that played with my daughter, and we were both trying to do the same things. And so he's a parent who has a daughter who's in college. He can tell you where she is and what she's doing and what that meant for her journey and how he picked that. But he also wants to give an overview of his recruiting services. So Van, thanks again. Both of you have been with us for every year for this. So I appreciate you. Go ahead, Van.
Yeah, thank you, Coach Thomas. Again, my name is Van Graves, and I run a company called IPC Recruiting. And we're basically what we specialize in, more of a boutique. We specialize in helping kids identify HBCUs only. So kind of how I got started, I got 2 daughters. One was an All-American in lacrosse. So we kind of went the route of, she had an opportunity to go to Temple and George Mason, but she decided to go to Lock Haven University, which is in the PSAC, which at the time was a national powerhouse. So she went there and finished in 3 years. And then we took that 4th year of her eligibility to go get her master's. And she had that 4th year of eligibility, she went to Delaware State, which is an HBCU, and one of only 2 HBCUs to offer lacrosse. Took advantage of that, got her master's, and she got all that within 4 years. So there's always a method to the madness. Now I have a youngest one, as Harry mentioned, that played with Ray, his daughter, with New Jersey Intensity. Her name is Reese. She's an outfielder at Southern University. So what I kind of did was, having gone through that process with my oldest daughter, kind of looked at that format and say, hey, there are other kids out here that may just want to primarily focus on HBCU. So what I did was kind of established a model where I could work with kids in all sports, various sports, and just kind of focus on the HBCU route. So, you know, a lot of times it comes down to, it's not even the best athlete from my perspective. A lot of times it's, do you have a relationship with that school? Is that kid the type of kid that that particular coach is looking for? So, you know, if I pick up a phone call and say, hey, Coach Wiggins at FAMU, you know, here's this great outfielder. She's a lefty. She's got the grades. You know, they're going to listen. And I think that for me, it's all about the relationships. Everything that Coach Brown and everything you've heard today is, it's academics. Academics is the key. And I'll be the first one to tell you, if a coach tells you you're going to get 100%, there is no 100% from my perspective paid scholarship athletically. It's half academic, it's half athletic. And I think if you prepare yourself that way, then you're on top of the game. So that 8th grade year for parents, your kids going into high school, that freshman year, we call it protect the GPA. So the kids that actually played with Ray and my daughter Reese, most of those girls went to college last year as freshmen, but they were carrying 18 credits already as freshmen, okay? So with that being said, they're in that position now, just like my youngest one, she will actually graduate early. And actually with the, Mr. Carter, with the pandemic, she will be a junior basically with senior, second semester senior, I think next year, with sophomore year eligibility because of the pandemic. And plus what she carried in as a freshman. So my point is, if you're a freshman or a senior taking honors class, parents always, I think it's important that the parents stay on top of those kids' grades and hold those kids accountable, because if you stick with the mindset of a 3.0 or higher, there's a lot more opportunity for you with a higher GPA athletically and academically. Because again, coaches are looking for the team GPAs. And if you can see, if you go out there and look, you know, this team, the tennis team is 3.2, softball typically hovers around 3.5, 3.6. And if a coach can see that, hey, that this kid is academically sound, that's another check in that box, okay? You know, my motto has always been, you know, making a difference in one player and one family at a time. So I don't try to go get a lot of kids all at once, because again, you know, I've got football. And just to give you an idea from a football perspective, I had one kid, Jacoby Smith, out of Portsmouth, Virginia. The kid last year threw for over 3,000 yards, 0 scholarships. Nobody, no recruitment, not even Norfolk State, nobody. So what I did was I had a relationship with Sean Moore to play with the Detroit Lions. And I said, and University of Virginia, I said, well, evaluate this kid and tell me what you think. Do you really think he's a Division I prospect? So I sent him the tape. I got a call back 30 minutes later, Mr. Carter. He said, man, I don't understand why this kid is not being recruited. So I made one phone call to Mississippi Valley State, and they took him overnight. So again, that's where those relationships, but the good thing about it, not only did this kid have the athletic ability, this kid had a 3.5 GPA, which made it a lot easier, okay? So going back to the common theme of your GPA, as student athletes, even in high school and middle school, that GPA is very important. You know, now there's the myth of, you know, does it make a difference, Coach Van, on what type of travel ball team you're on? And I think that's one of those things where Coach Braxton and Coach Thomas and you guys the coaches can debate on that. Now, I will say from my experience, you know, having a daughter to play collegiate lacrosse, she was on one of the top travel teams from a lacrosse perspective. And you can say, well, Van, did that help? It did. From a softball perspective, my Reese playing on New Jersey Intensity, did it help? It did. Now, but also the other part to it is Ray and Reese couldn't want it. I mean, they had to want it more than what their parents wanted. Okay. So at 7 o'clock in the morning, Ray had to get up, practice on her own, pitch on her own, and get that job done. Reese had to get up at 7 and hit 300 balls in the morning before she went to school. That's the kind of dedication as a student athlete. If you want to get to that next level, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, once you put that kind of work in, because Harry Thomas III doesn't get the Campbell if he doesn't put that work in. okay? And we have to understand that. So my 2 bits to you girls today is, and guys on here, if you want to play at the next level, regardless of what level it is, you have to put the extra work in. And I'll share this with you. I had Coach Wiggins at FAMU when Reese was getting recruited. You know, she said one of the biggest challenges for our kids is they're not really fundamentally sound, you know? And I said, well, give me an example. She said, well, just like the outfield. She said, well, your daughter can play outfield. You know, we can tell that she's had the right kind of coaching from an outfield. They just didn't throw her out there. But you'd be surprised how many coaches, if you go to some of these travel ball games, they'll stick our kids in the outfield who don't really understand how to play the outfield. And then when you're trying to get that kid recruited, it makes it tough because they don't know anything about a drop step. They don't even know how to make the throw from, you know, third to the cutoff and all those type things. So advantage you guys have in this program, you got a coach like Coach Thomas who understands, you know, how the big travel programs work, and you take that knowledge and you can filter it down so that you kids can become successful and have the fundamentals that it takes when you go to these camps. And I was at a tournament last month for softball down in Richmond, and every kid I talked to wanted to go to the University of Alabama, Coach Braxton, or LSU. And for, you know, a couple of parents, I said, well, look, I think that's great. I'm not a dream killer, but those type of kids are what I call a 1%er, okay? And you're talking about a roster of, some of those programs got 40 kids on that roster, okay? So the chances of you actually playing and getting any recognition, any looks at, are slim to none. But that's, as a parent.
Something, can I plug something right there? Because
Sure.
one of the things that I ask when I talk to the players, and sometimes these are players that are, you know, they could have a surge or it might not. And I ask them, and this is where I talk about D1-itis. Do you want to Division I softball or do you want to watch Division I softball? Because there's a difference. You can watch from the dugout, but to go somewhere and sit and pinch run 3 times in a 54-game season, is that really what you want? So it's, you know, and I explain to them, every school has a box, and sometimes you just don't fit that box. If they've already got a 6-foot left-handed first baseman and you're a 6-foot left-handed first baseman, they probably don't need another one. So, you know, it's understanding, you know, you got to fit, you know, we tell them all the time, you got to fish in the right pond. There is nothing wrong with Division II, Division III, NAIA, JUCO, if, you know, if that's where it ends up being. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but.
I want to,
That's in a nutshell, it's really, you know, you're matching the kids' talents, and the kids have to be, and the parents have to be open-minded too. It can't always be, you know, this is what the parent, it's about realistically, what can this kid get out of this? What can they do to get in, get that 4-year degree, and or get that master's paid for, okay? And I think as a parent, if you can figure out a way in this process to say, hey, in 5 years, if my daughter, like I did for both of them, the goal was to how can I capitalize on all this work they put in from playing a sport to get that master's paid for. So
let me say this.
About having a plan.
I want to transition because I think it's very important that people understand, and that while first things first, I always tell people it's like kicking tires on a car and making sure you check under the hood and get what you get. So if nothing else you take from this call, I want you to understand that we have an athletic director and his compliance officer who stayed on this call when their time was done. That tells you something about the character and measure of those individuals, because they could have come on, given you a presentation, and what I'm going to ask them to do in closing and wrapping up is that, one, speaking about, you know, you talked, Van, about HBCUs and pushing folks. I want people to understand that HBCUs are not just for African-American athletes, and there's some challenges even for the HBCUs to find our students to get to those schools that are African American, but there are a lot of non-African American players, Latinos, white, others who were playing in those schools. And even at Coppin, for example, if you look at their roster, one of the questions that came up, in all honesty, Derek, was the fact that when you look at your roster, there weren't a lot of African American kids on that roster. So could you break that down for both baseball and softball and tell us some of the challenges and what it means and why non-African American kids kind of take the opportunity to go to these HBCUs so they can have a format to play in some of the different
Sure. Yeah, I'll be brief, but that's a great question, and that's a topic that we've been discussing a lot here. You look at our softball program. The majority of our softball players are white, and majority are from California. And we've had recent conversations. I have my coaches new. I've been on board less than a year, and we've had conversations of kind of rebranding our program. We look for quality athletes. I'm gonna be blunt about that. We look for quality student athletes, and you know, you can get into the debate of, well, why are you going to California? We had a previous coaching staff. That's where their ties were, and it kind of evolved that way, that coaches go by where they're connected. So you have to have coaches who you have to stress to them, if this is your connection, you have to expand where your connections are and explore opportunities that are more in-state. So we're looking at that. You hear a lot that programs struggling to find African-American softball, baseball players. Of course, I'm not buying it, but it's a two-way street. It's up to us to get our coaches to be more aggressive and look for opportunities that you can have more of a diverse population on your teams. But it's up to students, high schoolers, to be sure that they have their games ready, that when the coaches are looking for them, it's no excuses. Like, you're ready to play at this level. So we're going to do our part, but it's a two-way street to that. And we have to make sure that coaches can't say, well, I like this young lady, this young man, but they don't bring this to the table. So Vera, I think you can add to that, because these have been conversations that we've been having. And Vera, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I know that as far as the sport as a whole, we do know that in our inner cities where there are minority or African-American players is very scarce, or the level of play is at a lower level. The other thing is, when you have top African-American athletes in softball and baseball, they choose to go to predominantly white universities instead of coming to the HBCU. So that is a challenge that some of our coaches face, but again, it's a challenge that can be, they can overcome that.
Yeah.
And I was going to say also, the non-African American comes to those schools also realizes, and it's funny you said that a lot of your kids are from California, and we've dealt with it a lot. But you had a lot of Latino kids that come here because they weren't getting the same opportunities on the West Coast at those big schools, and they wanted to come D1. Can you speak to that a little bit too?
Yeah, it's about D1. It's Harry. That's the real. What we hear is they want the opportunity to play D1 softball, so they don't have a problem with coming from California to come into, in our case, Baltimore, or coming into any other of our sister MEAC institutions, or either going to SWAC institutions, because they want to compete D1. And
go ahead. I think Tonja's going to add too, but finish your statement, Derek, and then
No, I was completed. I think Tonja's going to add to that, and she probably will add from a coach's perspective. She's had experience in the MEAC, but that D1 carries a lot of weight, is my point.
So, parents, let me just say this to everybody on the call, because Tonja's going in and out, and I'll just say from my perspective, even at my NAIA, 70% of my kids are from California. a lot of politics goes into it, depending upon where you are. In Virginia, we talk about it a lot, where the travel ball coaches are coaching high school. If you don't play for that travel ball and his travel ball team, he's not promoting you at your high school. And so you as parents have to be vigilant and understand how all of that works and make sure, you know, it was always interesting to me when, you have to let your kids have a relationship with their coaches, but in no way does that mean you don't take stock in what's happening in your child's life. And so I'm saying that to you because here we are 31st, and to a person, parents and children are on this call. Filter it, help them understand that there are going to be some conversations, and I let, for example, even with my daughter who's a D1 athlete, I let them have their own relationships with their coaches. I'm a fan when I go to those games. And I let them have their conversations. Now, as a parent, sometimes I tell her a different approach should be had. And if she wants to take that approach, she can take it. And conversations, our perspective, is what you need to do. But you guys being here this last year of the year is going to set what you need to do in January forward for 2021. So I just wanted to say that to you guys. I wanted to thank Tonja and I wanted to thank Van. I wanted to thank the two guests from Coppin that we had on this. I want that so you can get their information, reach out to them. And I also will tell you that you need to, understand that this is indicative of what recruiting is about. You're competing against all kinds of environments and all kinds of people, and you're competing from states where people play a lot of softball. And some of my parents on here understand that they go back and forth, but you also have to understand that the core values that we're bringing to this is about making sure you have what you need to be successful student athletes. Anybody else want to add anything? Please do in closing. Derek, you want to close out?
Certainly. I want to thank everybody. Hopefully, we provided some information for you. We agreed to do this simply because we care about young people and seeing them succeed in athletics through academics. So wish everybody a new year. To the students, hopefully you've listened to some of the things that we've said. We want you to focus on your academics, focus on working on your games, and focus on being good people. Because good people, at the end of the day, coach is going to win with good people. That's the formula. You got to be talented, but you got to be a good person who's coachable and who a coach can rely on and someone who's accountable. So take advantage of what we said, and I wish you the best.
God bless, and you all can unmute and just tell Derek thank you, tell Tonja thank you, tell Van thank you, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for having us.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. We'll talk.
Thank you, as always. And if you need information, I will give you the information as well for all these wonderful contacts. Go to Coppin's website and look up their information, look at their coaching staffs. We'll have further conversations. I also have a recruiting, what I call cheat sheet that I'll be giving out and posting. So you can have that if you need it from me. Questions you need to be asking coaches in your recruiting process so you don't go into this drive. So happy New Year. Enjoy the night. Be safe. And let's get ready to get back to work. Everybody's going to keep playing. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See you. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Coach Harry.